Welcome back to Pathways. This is Chris Ann. On our podcast, we explore the many ways healing, growth, and transformation can take shape. Today's episode is one of the most moving and tender conversations I've had the honor to share. Jason Tuttle is a father, writer, and fierce advocate for emotional honesty in the face of unimaginable loss. After the passing of his son Zachary in 2020, Jason began writing letters to his son, unfiltered, emotional, and real. Those letters became Letters to Zachary, a blog, a community, and now a beautiful grief coloring book designed to help families process loss together. In this conversation, Jason opens his heart to talk about what it means to love a child through complex medical challenges, how he processed anger and grief as a man, and the power of finding connection and purpose after tragedy. His story is one of profound love, quiet strength, and radical vulnerability. Let's begin.
Hello.
Hello.
Um,
You.
how are you today?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm I'm towards the end of the school year for me, so it's wild where I am.
Uh-huh. Yes, yes. Getting end of school,
Mm-hmm.
last minute things done.
Mm-hmm.
I know how that is.
I saw that you're from Canton, Georgia. I'm on the other side of Atlanta.
Oh, really? That's so
Yeah,
fun.
I'm in Coweta County. I'm in Noonan.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. Wow. I didn't realize we were so close.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small world.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, well, thank you so much for joining me on here today to
Okay.
um, share your story a little
Sure.
bit and explore a little bit of your pathway and how you got to where you are today.
Okay.
So, I'd love to maybe just start by having you share, who Zachary was,
Okay.
not just in terms of like his medical needs, but his personality, his spirit, and what made him unique for you.
Okay. Excuse me. My son, despite all of his medical issues, was a very laid back, happy child. Not a whole lot really bothered him. And throughout his life with his medical stuff, there was a lot of pretty difficult situations that he went through, and he always pretty much had a smile on his face when it was going on. Very rarely was he ever upset, and even with some of the daily things I had to do, he just nothing really bothered him, which is different than me by a long shot. He was very much a people person. He met no strangers. His thing was he loved giving people hugs. He was definitely a ladies' man. In fact, he had a hierarchy of women, meaning it was blonde haired, brown haired, brunette, black, and then redhead in that order. Uh, yes, he was very much, we would go out to one of his special needs functions. In fact, if you're in Atlanta, you probably know Bert's Big Adventure through Q100.
Oh, it sounds familiar.
That's the one where the radio station awards 12 families a year for kids with chronic and terminal illnesses and to go down to Disney. Uh, everything is provided for, nothing is said no to. And he actually won that trip in 2013. So one of the co-hosts of the Burt Show was there, Kristen, and she's got long blonde hair, and you can see every picture they took with him and her. He was just longingly looking into her eyes, and I told her several times. I said, "I wish you all the best with your husband, and should anything ever happen, he's waiting in line." And so she would always get a kick out of that. But you know, he loved watching sports. He was big into Special Olympics, specifically bowling. He seemed to really enjoy that. When we did it, he really liked hippotherapy, which is horseback riding therapy. He seemed to really enjoy that. But yeah, overall, he was a really just laid back, well rounded kid that unfortunately was dealt a medically hard life with the cards that he got.
Yeah. Um, can you share a little bit of what his medical needs were?
I can. It depends on how much time we've got. So a little bit of the backstory was up until the week 20 appointment, which everybody knows is where you find out the sex of the child when you've got someone pregnant. We had no reason to believe that there were going to be any issues, period. We had nobody in our family that we knew that had any real significant issues other than self-induced like an alcoholism, that kind of thing. Um, but it was at the week 20 appointment that they found an issue. They and they needed to know the sex of the child because at that time they knew that his rare condition was rare in boys, but it's even rarer in girls. And so they really needed to know the sex of the child. But long story short, with that, he was born with a rare condition called Eagle Barrett syndrome. It's 1 in 40,000 births, at least at the time he was born. The easiest way to explain it without getting long and drawn out is he was born without any core abdominal muscles, none. So, like where you and I have the front abs and the side abs, that kind of stuff, he had none of that. Like, I could literally lay him on the floor, and from the outside, I could literally touch his large intestine, his small intestine. I could show you where his stomach was, his kidneys were. Like you could see the whole outline of his whole midsection right there. And the only thing keeping his insides from the outside world was the skin and kind of the white fascia that holds the skin together. Um, so there was that part. That's one of the major issues of it. Another major issue is the fact that he was born with an abnormally large bladder, but he didn't always get the sensation to go to the bathroom. So for the first 5 or 6 years of his life, I had to cath him every 4 hours so that he could drain his bladder because otherwise he would either get distended or the way you get urinary tract infection is the fact that in that fluid you've got sediment, and it's that sediment that kind of sits there, and that's what infects things, in the urological tract. So if I didn't cath him every 4 hours, he was very susceptible to urinary tract infections. Um, the other big thing is he had a normal lung capacity, but because he, like you and I, because we've got the abdominal muscles, when we get a respiratory related virus, we have kind of that foundation that we can build pressure on to like cough the crud out. He couldn't always do that. So if I didn't catch it fast enough, I knew ultimately we were going to end up in the hospital. Uh, After about the first year or two of his life, like I'm in his room on the other side of where you can't see. I used to have a wall of respiratory machinery that I would use every. There was a specific sound I heard. When I heard it, I knew I would go through kind of my medical protocol of what I would do and how I would do it to try to help him along to not have him be in the hospital. Although ultimately he ended up in the hospital. So for the first 5 or 6 years of his life, we were in and out of an ICU at Scottish Rite in North Atlanta every 6 months for the first 6 years of his life. It was pretty consistent. Now, that is just the Eagle Barrett syndrome. He's got four other issues that are not related to each other. It just happened to happen. Um, he had severe developmental delays, meaning when he passed, even though he was 15 years old, he functioned about 7 or 8 years old. He was epileptic. He had two different kinds of seizures. He was nonverbal, and he could walk with assistance, but like to walk on his own, no. He could army crawl like nobody's business, and he was essentially wheelchair bound when we were out and about just because he couldn't walk on his own. So that was everything that he was born with.
Wow. So as a full-time caregiver
Mm.
for all that time, how do you feel like that shaped you in your role kind of as a father and as a man in that role?
Um, it made me realize that when push comes to shove, you would be amazed at what you can learn to do. Things that There were things that I learned to do in his care that I never thought in my wildest imagination that I would have to learn how to do, like being able to give him a catheter. At one point, coming home from the hospital, I had to learn how to give him a feeding tube into his stomach. I had to learn how to do that. I became very well versed on pulmonary issues and urological issues and neurological issues. So there was a lot of learning there that I never thought I would have to learn. Um, my what my son taught me was most of the time you just got to face life kind of head on. You know, it's tough that we get whatever we get dealt in life, but you still have to move forward. You've got to deal with it somehow. And my son was always the most laid back about it. I know if I would have been in his position, I probably wouldn't have been anything like that. So he was he persevered a lot. He was a strong, even though he may not have looked like it, he was a very strong fighter. Um, and it made me, you know, just learning and watching him go through the struggles with as much resiliency and just kind of peace about it. It certainly taught me a better way or how to be better equipped just to deal with life when you get thrown curveballs.
Yeah. You mentioned that he was nonverbal. How did you
Mhm.
guys communicate?
Well, he was nonverbal in the sense of he didn't say words, but like I could say short yes and no questions, and he would either clap his hands if he wanted to do it, or he would make sounds like when he wanted to do something. And so that's kind of how we communicated. Um, if I could get it in a yes and no question, and I was amazed at how I could form yes and no questions for everything in life. I never thought I could, to where I could get it to where he could kind of understand it. Um, I got really good at reading nonverbal cues and body language. Like I got to the point that I could tell he was getting sick before he got sick. And in fact, there was one case that I took him up to the hospital. I thought he was getting sick. I got him into the ER. The ER doc goes, "Well, I'm gonna do a chest X-ray and I'm gonna test him for I forget what it was." And he says, "Well, when I come back, I'll let you know." And he comes back and he goes, "The test I forget what it was, but he was looking for a specific number and he tests him and he goes, if the test is over 5, we're going to keep him in the hospital to observe him. If it's below 5, we're going to send you home, give you meds. If something should change, come back." And I said, okay. He comes back later and goes, the number was 5.5. And he goes, I'm going to leave it up to you. If you want to stay, we'll admit him. If you want to go home, we'll give you meds and you can come back up should something change. And I said, well, due to his history, I would, even if it's one night, I would prefer being here because I'm 60 miles from that hospital. I said, I'd rather be here should something arise versus me getting up in the middle of the night and having to drive 100 miles an hour up there and go through this process again. And he was completely okay with it. Well, sometime in the middle of the night, they come in with a mobile x ray, they take an x ray again. And he comes back that morning and he goes, I don't know how you did it. And I said, how did I do what? And he goes, that number last night was 5.5. He said, when I did the x ray early this morning, it was 19. He goes, based on that x ray versus what we're seeing now, he said, you literally brought him in the moment the pneumonia was forming. He said, you could not have brought him in any sooner than you did. And I said, there was just this cough and this sound that I've heard before, and I knew that if I couldn't get it under control at the house, I was coming up here.
Right. Yeah. Did you feel like you had a lot of um, like a deeper, almost telepathic connection with him in terms of communicating and sort of knowing?
Oh, definitely. Especially on the medical perspective. Um, I just, I don't know how I did it, but in my personal life, I tend to be one that I'll notice kind of off the wall stuff, and I'm big about noticing patterns, and it's probably part of my ADHD that I deal with. And when I notice when I notice whatever his pattern was, and anything was out of the ordinary, it always piqued my interest. Like, wait a minute, he normally is this way. Why is he this way? And that's more how I was able to kind of catch things either before they happened or as they were happening.
Mm. So, um, January 28th,
Yep,
2020 is the day that you lost him. Um, and that is what led to your creation of Letters to Zachary.
correct.
Um, what would you feel called to share us about that day and kind of the birth of your platform, Letters to Zachary?
Well, I'm okay sharing with just about all of it. That day can get very detailed, but essentially what had happened was 2 days before that day, that night, he threw up a little bit. I I was a stay-at-home parent at the time. I thought that because my wife was brushing his teeth at the time, and I looked at her and said, "Well, maybe you went too far and you kind of hit the gag reflex, and something just came up." We didn't think much about it. We cleaned him up. We made sure he was okay. We put him in bed. He was always a great sleeper. I mean, literally from the day he got home, he was always a great sleeper. And that night he was up and down literally all night, which was unusual for him. So I decided to keep him home the next day, which was Thursday. And I got his sister off to school. And like I told him that day, buddy, you can take a nap, you can relax. I know you're tired. You've been up and down all night long. You've got to be exhausted. But he absolutely, for whatever reason, refused to. Um, we went throughout the day. He didn't want to eat and drink a whole lot, and that didn't really catch my attention. Although, if it had gone into another day, I would have gone, wait a minute, something's not right. He's really not eating and drinking. I need to do something about it. Um, so that night, we put him to bed again. He immediately got quiet, and my wife and I just thought, well, he's just got to be exhausted because he's probably been up for 40 hours at his age. And I thought I mean, his body probably just gave out from exhaustion, and didn't didn't hear anything that night. We just figured he got a really good night of sleep. We figured he may have a 24-hour virus. Didn't think much about it. I kept that Friday. I decided to keep him home that morning. I sent my daughter off to school. So I come into his room, into the bed right behind me. And usually when I would come in, he'd clap and get excited and bounce in his bed because he was happy to see us. And that would be his greeting to us. Well, I came in that morning and he was not lethargic, but his eyes were open and he kind of just blank stared at me, which kind of caught my attention. And I went over to the other side of the bed and pulled down his railing, and I noticed he had a dark green streak coming out of his mouth. And I looked at my wife and I said, "The only thing dark green in your mouth the only thing dark green in your body that could possibly come out of your body would be bile. And why is it coming out of his mouth?" And so I looked at my wife. I said, "Something's really not right." So I get him out in the living room. I do my protocol. Nothing's really changing anything. And so it was honestly a hunch. I'm getting him dressed. I'm taking him to the local hospital. Um, I'll let you know. So I get him in the van and I do 100 miles an hour up to Scottish Rite on the north end of Atlanta. And I park. I get his chair out of the van and I go to lift him out, and he's really floppy, lethargic, and this catches my attention. Like at that point, I'm starting to get really concerned because I'm just like, something's really not right. I get up into the ER and I skip the line. And before I can get to the front desk, the security guard comes over to me as if to say, "You need to get in line." And before he can say anything, I went, "I don't think he's breathing. I need help immediately." So he snaps his fingers. The nurse comes over to me. She looks at him. Now, understand, I've been in this hospital 100 times. And this nurse looks at me and goes, "Follow me." And we run at a full speed back to the ER. I've never run anywhere in this hospital. So we get back in the ER trauma room, and I get him out of his chair, I put him on the table there, and I back out of the way in hope that they'll let me stay in there. Because one, he's nonverbal, and the state, excuse me, that he comes in there, he's not talking anyways. So I'm the only one that can really tell them what's going on. So there's another trauma room beside it that's open. I back off in there and they let me stay in there. So they immediately cut off his clothes. They intubate him, which is putting the tube in to get air into his lungs. They immediately start chest compressions. Um, and then a gentleman on his, let's see, it was his left side, just comes over to his knee and literally drills a port into his knee. No anesthesia, nothing. And a normal person, if you did that, it would be so painful that you would come out of your skin because of just where it was and just the nerves that are there. Now, later I asked him, I said, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "Well, the state in which your son came in, when we get a patient like that, um, it's a way to get antibiotics and stuff into them immediately. And we know that when we do that, because of the state they're in, they're not feeling it anyways. This is kind of a almost a last ditch effort to try to get them revived again." And I said, "Okay, I understand that." So I'm in there watching this whole thing as it's unfolding, and the ER doc comes over to me and she goes, "Down to the minute, how long has he been this way?" And I said, I go, plus or minus 2 minutes, he's been this way for X amount of minutes. And she goes, "Okay." She barks orders. She comes back to me and she goes, "Explain to me the scenario as to why you brought him up here." And so I tell her everything that's going on. And she goes off and kind of gives orders to everybody in there because there's like 15 people in here at this point. It surprised me how many. They're doing their business, and I'm watching it, just taking it all in. And about 5 minutes, no, 10 minutes into it, I see them get the paddles out. They put the stickers on them. And just like a medical drama, I hear them yell "clear," and they hit that button, and he raises off the table just like in a medical drama. Now, while this is happening, I'm looking at the monitor that I've looked at 100 times before, kind of the heart rate and the breathing rate and the pulse ox and all that stuff on there. And that heart rate does one little beep up and goes right back to what it's doing. So as I'm watching this, in my brain, I'm going, "He's not coming back." Now, understand at this point, it's 10 minutes. They work on him for a total of 45 continuous minutes until it's done. And in fact, I told the ER doc, I said, I know y'all were trying to do everything you could, but I said, I never thought y'all would work for almost an hour trying to save him. I said, even though the result was the same, I appreciate your effort. So, they shock him. He kind of goes back to what he's doing, and I'm thinking he's not coming back, but it doesn't hit me because I'm having to compartmentalize everything. I'm not understanding the severity of the situation in this moment. I say it to myself that I think he's not coming back, but it just doesn't hit me. So they continue to work on him, and they probably shock him 4 or 5 times throughout the entire time. The doc comes over to me and she goes, "Well, I can shock him again, but unfortunately," she said, "I think the result's going to be the same." And I just said, "I know a lot about his condition." I said, "But this is out of my professional wheelhouse. This is out of my wheelhouse. Do what you think is professionally necessary." And I don't remember. I think they shocked him again, and she comes back to me and she pronounces them. So I turn into the other trauma room and I have a moment literally for about 30 seconds. It's that fast. And I regain composure and I call his mother. Now, understand at this point, my wife's working from home. She's doing the the virtual stuff for her work. My wife at this point is thinking, well, I'm just getting admitted to the hospital. We're going to have our, 7 to 10 day stay that we always have. And I'm just calling her to say, hey, we're admitted. This is the room we're in. I have to call her and tell her that her son is dead on a table. And I will never forget the blood curdling crying that just hit her. And so she does that for about a minute and then she starts regaining her composure. And I say, just be quiet for a minute. I said, I'm not trying to be bossy or demanding. I said, but this moment requires this. I said, get a hold of your boss, tell them what happened, leave work, call your parents, have them drive you up here. I'll be waiting on you. And she goes, okay. Because I knew she couldn't make decisions in that moment after what I just told her. And she said, okay. I said, please do that. We are in this room. And so she does that. And then I have to call my mother, who's watched her grandson many times. And I'll never forget her response. And we get off the phone. Now, 2 weeks later, my mother pulls me to the side and she goes, I'm curious, how soon after Zachary passed did you call me? And I said, 10 minutes. And she goes, 10 minutes? She said, so he had been passed away literally 10 minutes prior and you just called me? And I said, yes. And she goes, you were stoically and eerily calm and your son had literally just died right before you. And I said, yes. I said, but I had to compartmentalize in that moment because if I'd been a blubbering idiot, if you will, I wouldn't have been able to tell y'all what had happened. And I said, I needed to tell y'all what had happened. And so, I mean, she understood that. And, I waited for his mother to come up and the care team came in there and, I found out, just what I needed to do to get him home and to the funeral home, that kind of thing. And we were there for probably another hour with his mother and her parents. And I tell people all the time, I said, outside of the actual passing, I said the two things that are burned in my brain, everything had happened. I was waiting on my wife to come up there to see him, and I went to go grab his hand, and he was ice cold. And that struck me as odd because I don't 45 minutes earlier, he was, full of life and he was warm. And it just struck me how fast he got cold. And the other thing that really struck me was after we finally decided to leave and, we were going to go to the funeral home, that kind of thing. I had to take all of his cut off clothing, put it in his empty wheelchair, and roll that thing through the hospital. And that was the longest walk I think I've ever taken. I will never forget that moment. Um, but that was kind of that day. I mean, there were several other things that happened with family and funeral home that day, but that was from the time I got him up to the time he was pronounced was maybe 2 hours that morning.
What inspired you to start writing the letters to Zachary, and how did that evolve into this public blog and community?
So I grieved very hard for probably a year and a half. And in that time, I've always been a big proponent of counseling or therapy, whoever one sees. And I believe that we all go through seasons of needing it. And the irony is 2 weeks prior to him passing, I'd literally just called to cancel with my counselor because I felt like I had gotten through that season and there wasn't a whole lot I had to talk about to her. So that had happened, and I called her and I started going sessions again. And probably about the sixth or seventh session I had after that, one day she goes, have you ever thought about writing a journal? And the irony is my response was, I don't think I'm that great of a writer. I don't know if that's something that's kind of my thing to do. Excuse me. And she goes, well, you don't have to do it right now. She said, you can put it on the back burner. It's something you can pick up later. And she's just like, even if you do start writing, you don't necessarily have to share it with anybody. It's more of to get it off of you versus all that just sitting on you. And I said, okay. And it sat on the mental back burner for probably 9 months after that point. It was a long time. And in that process, we all know that Facebook has a group for everything. So I went on there to find grief groups and I found several that I joined, but I found one that was parents that had lost a special needs child, which I'm shocked that I found because grief is already a specified field, but to find one of parents that lost special needs kids, it goes from this big down to about this big, is how small it is. And I got to know the female admin in there very well. And one day, after I'd started writing, I messaged her and said, "Hey, do you mind if I post one of my journal entries?" And almost before I could finish the statement, she goes, "Yes, please post it." She said, "We never get any men in here willing to open up about this topic, and all of us that are the women in here would love to hear your perspective on it." And I said, "Okay." So I copied and pasted one, and right before I hit, send to post it, I paused for a minute and I thought, as noble as this is, it's still the internet. And if I get negative comments on it, am I going to be able to handle it? Because at this point I'd been grieved. I was still within the first year of grief. And I didn't want to post something, someone have a negative comment on me, want to jump down their throat because they just disagreed with whatever my stance was. But I still posted it, didn't get any response in it, and then later that evening I all of a sudden it blew up. I got a massively positive response. I had all these mothers and girlfriends and you name it in there, all commenting very positive things. In fact, I had one woman that I'll never forget. She goes, "We've never met, our paths have never crossed. I've never told anybody how I felt deep down inside. And I just read this letter." And she goes, "You have nailed how I feel on the head, word for word." She's just like, "Nobody has been able to understand how I feel before you." And I said, "Well, I appreciate that it resonates with you. It's inspired by my son." And I said, I'm glad you can just, it's something that you can hold on to, that at least someone else understands how you feel. So I kept doing it for several weeks, and it started to evolve into a Facebook group because after several weeks of getting kind of the same style response in my brain, I went, I've got something here. Let's see if I can kind of grow this because I think it's a necessary thing. And I made a Facebook page and I started building a following there. And, it started kind of getting word of mouth. And, it all kind of blew up from that very first post. And I tell people all the time, um, if it hadn't have been that one woman's comment, I probably wouldn't be here today. So it all started for me sharing in one of the Facebook groups, and it was also while I was grieving and kind of verbally vomiting on a page, if you will, knowing that it was helping others that were feeling misunderstood helped me to heal in my grief.
Right, and for them to not feel alone in their
Exactly.
thoughts and feelings, I mean, just so profound. And what a great testament to um like just be brave and be vulnerable and share, and you just never know who you could be affecting. And then on the other side too, when you read something, to be able
Mhm.
to reach out and thank someone and let them know that what
Mhm.
they shared with you really touched them, because look what that sparked in you to move
Exactly.
forward. Like, oh, okay, that recognition. How would you say that, the act of writing and really sharing your grief, how has that impacted your healing process?
It's been a huge way of healing. Even before all of this, I've always been one that if I've had stress or emotion, I've always had to get it off of me. Because when, at least for me and my personality, if it sits there, that's never good for me. I have to find an outlet somehow. And even my wife said earlier this year, she goes, "You may not see it, but from my point of view, you are vastly different in your response now versus what you were in the beginning." Meaning, you know, the stages of grief, and typically for men, the first stage of grief is always anger. And for a while there, I was very internally angry for a long time. And so this helped me when I would write these letters to my son, it helped me to get that out. Meaning, if I felt like in that letter that I wanted to drop an F bomb or say something in that vein, that's how I wrote it. I wrote in the moment, this is how I'm feeling in this moment, dealing with this just devastation. And so for it to have the ability to drop an F bomb when I needed to, because that was the only word that described how I was feeling in that moment, that was huge for me.
How would you say that the feeling or the experience of being internally angry? Like, how did you know that you were feeling that way, or how did that show up in your day to day in terms of internal anger?
Um, high stress. Um, Irritation level went from about 20 to 100. um, Frustration level, dropped from, where it used to be where not a whole lot would frustrate me. At that point, it was everything was frustrating me.
Mm.
And so it was kind of those characteristics that I knew the the anger was definitely there. Now, if I really need a moment, I'd go out in the garage and do what I needed to do, just so it wasn't around my wife or my daughter. And my wife understood. I had always told her, I said, if I feel like I'm at that point, don't take it personal. If I have to walk off, it's better that I walk off and blow off steam versus something more significant happening. And that's always what I did. And so yeah, the frustration, the irritation, that kind of stuff, those were the big signs to me.
Mm. Yeah. And in some of your writing and whatnot, you mention like society's pressures on men
Hmm.
be strong and not show their emotions. And so in terms of like your journey, how did you confront those stereotypical ideals for navigating grief and this idea of masculinity?
Well, the biggest issue that a lot of men have, and I jokingly say this, outside of that first woman's response, the reason why all this was created was out of spite. And I joke about that because you go into these emotion filled groups on Facebook and you've got 99% women members and you've got 1% male members. And of those male members, none of them are active. And when I went into these groups, I wanted to find other men that maybe they didn't experience exactly the same thing, but I wanted them kind of at least in the ballpark, like they could kind of relate. But my scenario is very specific, and for someone to have the exact same thing, that's highly unlikely. So I went in there looking for other men, and I got so frustrated that I couldn't find them. I was just like, well, instead of getting upset about it, make something of your own. And that's the other side of how I made Letters to Zachary and everything that I've made. Um, Men are, well, I'm of the age of Generation X. And I joke and say we're the rub some dirt on it, walk it off generation. I cannot tell you how many times I was told that in sports and just growing up. Um, my generation was taught that if you are emotional, it's short and to the point, it's in private, it's never public. And if you do need time, that's the reason why they give you 3 bereavement days at work. And once those are done, you go back to work as if grief all of a sudden stops at 3 days. Um, those are kind of the things that a lot of men deal with outside of you know, it's getting better in the younger generations, but at least with my generation, we were always taught that we're the foundation of the family. We're the one that takes on the struggle. We're the providers. We're the all the stereotypes you can think of. If after all that's done and taking care of the wife and the kids and however we're going to do that with, if there's any time left, then sure, you can have your moment there, but it still needs to be short. Um, it just for whatever reason there was a stigma added to it, and I personally have never understood why.
Mm. Yeah. How how do you think, like, if you were to, speak to other women out there? How can they, best support men in their life that they know that are dealing with grief? And especially if the man is, you think, potentially um, feeling some of those stereotypical messages, or, struggling with being able to express.
Well, oh, I lost my train of thought. A lot of the times that I've said to many women online, I go, most men, when it comes to relationships, they want to be the protector and provider. It's not that we don't want to be that. We don't mind that the female side is more emotional, whether that's stereotypical or not. We're okay with that. If y'all are having your moment and all that, and you want us to be there, just someone to listen to whatever your issue that you're going through is, that's fine. We don't mind that. But there are rare occasions, or maybe more than that, where we do have our moments. And so I tell women, what men are taught in society is that women's emotions come first. And what I mean by that, and the example I always give is, if you don't believe that to be true, I live on a street with 50 houses on it. And I can guarantee I can walk in at least to 5 of them that somewhere in that house there's the phrase that we all have heard, happy wife, happy life, on some sort of plaque or something like that. Again, men don't have an issue with that, but what that subconsciously tells us is the woman and everything about her comes first. And again, 99% of men want to be able to provide that. But when it comes to emotions and all that, if we have it, it teaches us that hers comes first. Once she's done with it, if there's anything left, ours can possibly come in there. And I try to tell women, if you have a significant other that's not opening up, there's just a couple of things you got to be aware of. First, if he finds it important enough to come to you when all of his life he's been told that you don't open up about it, and your first comment is, I can't believe you're upset about that, is that really bothering you? A comment in that vein, he may not say something to you, but he will note it in his head, and that subconsciously tells him that his feelings are not as important as yours. And so I say that to women, this is not a personal attack. This is just something to be mindful of if you're wanting your male significant other to open up. Um, when you're when your significant other comes to you and starts talking to you about whatever the issue is that's bothering them, you've got to listen and not listen to respond. You've got to be able to hear what the person is saying, not waiting for an opportunity to jump in there. I've heard on several different occasions from different people that go, the moment I stop to take a breath, she jumps in and tells whatever my emotional moment is, she jumps in there, twists what I have around, and tries to tell me how my emotions are bothering her. So basically that says, again, her emotions are more important than mine are. And if I'm going to meet this kind of wall every time, why am I going to open up to you? And then last but not least, I try to tell women, if you expect your male significant other to if you expect your male significant other to want to listen to you, whether it's venting or you just talking, because we all know men are fixers, and a lot of times the female significant other doesn't necessarily want us to fix it. They just want us to listen, and that's fine. But if you expect us to 100% listen to you as you're having your moment with us, it has to go the other way. It has to balance out. If it's only one-sided, there will always be problems. And that's more than just grief. That's just emotion in general. And so those are kind of the things that we deal with, outside of the last one being, a lot of men have been taught that if I open up now and we get into an argument later, this is going to get thrown back in my face. It's going to be thrown back in my face to hurt me because she's upset about whatever, because we're having an argument. why am I going to share something like this to you if I know it's just going to be thrown back at me when you're upset? And those are kind of the big ones that I try to tell people all the time. And again, I say it as not as attacking, but more as just be mindful of it.
Or are those some of the things that you feel like your wife did to support you in the journey, or is there anything unique that you feel like she did to hold space for you?
Well, the wonderful thing about my wife is we've all one in any marriage we've had our ups and downs, but one of the good things that we've always been good communicators back and forth. She as it relates to grief, she's the quiet one. She goes, has her moment, she comes back, she's okay with it. As you can imagine, with all this, I'm the more outspoken one about it. I'm the more open one about it. I'm the visual one when I do have those moments. Um, she always, the only thing I really asked of her, at least in the beginning year and a half of this, was when I need space, I need space. And it's nothing personal. It's just that's just how I'm processing all of this. And she was great with it because, again, me and her were vastly different in how we express this. Um, and she was always, if you need to talk, I'm here. I'm not going to push it. And, I've always been the same way to her. And now, if there are moments where we think each other are having a moment we're not talking about, we'll go, hey, is everything okay? And if we want to talk about it, we will. If it's just not something we want to do, we'll go, I just don't want to talk about it right now. And that's kind of how we've gone back and forth.
How does space, how does that look when you say like, I just need space? Does it mean like I'm just gonna go like take a walk or have some time, or or we're not gonna talk, or what does that look like kind of on the day to day if you were to ask for space so that somebody listening might be able to, if they feel like I just need space but I don't know how to communicate to that partner or how to explain to the partner how that might look for me, because I feel like that could probably be pretty different for each person.
Well, when I say I need space, I don't mean like physical, like I'm leaving the house.
Yeah.
I typically will get on my laptop, and on those moments that I need space, it's typically when I'll write something or do something grief related, and I'll put my headphones on and listen to my music, and I'll just like she jokes with me to this day. She said, I'll sit there and I'll be just typing away like a madman. And she's just like, what are you typing so feverishly about? And I'm just like, I'll let you know when I'm done. And, for us, that's what I mean. I mean, we're literally sitting on the same couch next to each other. And I'm just like, just give me a minute. I've got things on my brain that I have to get off. And that's just kind of my definition for us.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's not like you're not like setting a container of like I need 2 hours, or
No,
it's
no, nothing like that.
yeah, it's a little bit more in the flow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like she's very um graceful and patient with just letting you kind of do your thing and just letting you have that without sort of poking and prodding too much.
She has, and fortunately or unfortunately for her, my brain runs at about 1,000 miles an hour, and like when she wants suggestions for things, before she can finish the sentence of asking for suggestions, I will have five suggestions before she's finished. I my brain, and I admit it, sometimes my brain runs faster than my mouth will allow. Yeah, that's kind of how her and I operate. And she found that out very quickly on, and she was just like, "I'll let you have your minute."
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. I mean, I think that's what really makes, a relationship is being able to kind of understand each other's different ways of operating and just holding space for it. So in terms of, building this community and
Mhm.
this legacy of Zachary, what's been like the most surprising or meaningful response you've received from someone who found comfort in letters to Zachary?
Um, well, I'm nerdy in the sense that, like, when it comes to web pages and all that, I like all the analytics that go along with it and the numbers that go along with it. And whether the people on my Facebook page know it, I know who all my regular visitors are, my regular responders are. And so the fact that I continually write material that relates, like right now, I've got almost 1,250 followers on my Facebook page, and there's probably eight or nine that literally everything I post, they will make a comment on. And the fact that I write so many different variations of content, all grief related, but in different forms, and they always comment on it, they may not realize it, but that means the world to me that they find value in what I'm writing, because sometimes when I do this material, sometimes I'll type it out and I'll share it and I'll go, that seems like that runs on, or that seems like that doesn't make sense. And then I'll get one of them going, I was having a tough day and I read this and this is what I needed to hear. And so it's stuff like that that mean the world to me. I'm pretty simple when it comes to that.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in like the ripple effect that,
Mhm.
just these little things that you put out, you just have no idea how far that
Mhm.
can travel.
Mhm.
It's pretty profound. Um, so you've expanded your platform to include a coloring book aimed at helping families discuss grief. So what inspired this project and how's it been received so far? I love it. Oh,
So all my life I tell people I've been a little left of normal, and I always like things that are just, not what everybody else does. And I got in one of the podcasting groups on Facebook, and I ran across this woman that actually happened to run her own publishing company up in Boston, I believe. And we got to talking, and she had a podcast, and I was actually talking to her to try to see if, maybe we could do an episode that would relate to whatever her podcast was about. And she goes, well, we can do that, but she goes, I think I can do one better. She said, have you ever thought about publishing something? I said, I have. I said, but I just haven't had time for it. And so we went back and forth and brainstormed ideas, and it was actually her idea. She said, well, have you ever thought about a coloring book? And I said, well, that's a little unusual. And I said, I'm typically pretty unusual, so let's talk about it. And we got to talking about it, and that's kind of where the idea came from. Now, for the coloring book itself, at this point in the grief journey, I had created a following and I had several people that I'd collaborated with in the grief community. And so I wanted to find a way to give back, because at this point I'd had people help me build my following, several podcasters, several YouTubers, that kind of thing. And I wanted to find a way just to say thank you, because none of us in any of these communities gets where we are by ourselves. There's always people that help, whether it's advice or followings or you name it. So through the publisher, she made a website through her publishing website where I told all the people in the grief community that I knew at the time. I said, "Hey, I'm coming up with a coloring book, and if you're interested, I would like you to be a part of it. It doesn't cost you a single cent. I'm not asking for money, anything. All I want you to do is go to this website. It's going to be a survey on there. You're going to put your loved one that you lost name, or at least their first name and last initial. You're going to kind of put where you're from in there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to write several positive attributes about your loved one. It could be about their personality, about things they liked. It could be a favorite quote, a favorite saying, something like that about your loved one. And what'll happen is when you submit it, the team of publishers will then take all of your information, compile it together, and either make a collage picture, like a full-blown coloring book page collage picture of that relates to everything that you put in there, or if what you put in there deems it, they'll make an actual scene out of the information that you give in there. And then on the back side of that page, whatever your favorite saying or your thing that you loved about your loved one the most is going to be printed on the back of that page. So you're going to have the coloring page on one side and then all of the positive attributes about them printed on there. And then for the people that had podcasts and foundations and all that, I said, for you guys, if you do this, you can put all of your podcast information, everything that you're trying to promote in there. And then not only are you doing something for your loved one, but you're also promoting your venture that you're working on. And the only thing it's going to cost you is whatever the cost of the coloring book is, which there's nowhere on the face of this earth that you can advertise for $14.99, period. And so I said, it's at minimal cost. And I said, the the more you promote it, the more people are going to buy it and they're going to see your information in this book. And if all of us collaborating on this book promote it like I think we probably will, then think of all the free advertisement y'all are going to get doing this from us promoting, you promoting. And like there's 72 pages in here. So there's a lot of people in here that were doing that. And it was just a way to get back. And I initially wasn't sure how it would go, but it with 72 pages, it blew up, which I was thrilled that it was happening. So that's kind of how it did. The other reason is Zachary had a sister who has medical needs as well and delays and several other things. And one day I was sitting back thinking, how am I going to explain this to his sister in a simplistic way about such a difficult topic? And I thought, well, who doesn't like to color, adults and children? And then as a parent, my thought was, while she's quietly coloring, that will give me a moment to think on my feet of how can I explain this to my daughter while she's doing kind of a mindfulness activity that de-stresses her from such a difficult topic. And I can go in there and I can flip to a specific page and go, you remember what, your brother had? Well, this person had someone similar like that they lost them kind of like we lost your brother. And it would be something that I could relate to her. It was the other thought behind it. But yeah, that's how it kind of came about. Outside of the fact that I knew I always wanted something tangible that I could hold in my hands. And this is something that will outlast all of us who have put an entry in it. I have told people, excuse me, I have told people this is now on what I call life's bookshelf, and it will outlast us all long after we're gone. And that's kind of the whole ball of wax of it.
Love it. It's beautiful. I would say, like, looking back,
Mhm.
what have you learned about grief that you wish you had known at the beginning of your journey?
You know, grief is not what necessarily what people tell you it is, and it's not necessarily what, excuse me, what like TV shows and movies show you it is. Grief is not the 5 stages of grief. It's not like I finished stage 1 and I'm done with it forever and I move to stage 2. Grief is very fluid. So, I didn't know in the beginning that, there's 5 stages of grief, and most people think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, that's not the case at all. It's 1, 4, 5, 3, 5, 4, 2, 1, 5. I mean, it fluctuates depending on the moment, the day, and it's stuff like that I wish I knew. I wish I knew that I get more kind of love, so to speak, from strangers on the internet than I do with people around me. And that is a common theme with a lot of people that are dealing with grief. Um, I wish I knew that, a lot of people, when they come up to you in those moments, and I get it, they don't necessarily know what to say, but at least in the moment, I wish I had had the courage to say, look, if you don't know what to say, don't say anything. I'm not saying it to be mean, but you're going to try to find something to say to me that may or may not be offensive to me. And I know you're not trying to be intentional with that, but I've had several scenarios where they tried to come up with something on the fly and it was just offensive to me. And, you know, um, I, w- I wish I knew how to I wish I knew how to deal with those interactions a little better in the beginning than what I probably did.
What do you think someone could say to someone that is in grief that, you know, when when it would be sort of awkward to not say anything at
Yeah.
all? Like, what could they say that's supportive?
Well, I would say if the person you know is someone that you're very familiar with or a good friend, something in that kind of tier of people, you don't necessarily have to say anything at all. The only thing I was really looking for is someone that I knew was there, meaning you could call me and say, I'm thinking of you, or like go, hey, do you want to get out of the house for just a little while for some lunch? And you may do that 100 times, and I may say no 100 times. But believe me, I'm not missing the fact that you're reaching out to me, and that right there means the world to me. And I try to tell people that if you know someone with grief, just keep reaching out. They notice it, and they appreciate it, but also don't be offended if every time you get just a no. I mean, they may at some point say yes, but they still see what you're doing. One of the things that I had that was a frustration with me was people would say, "Will you just give me a call when you feel like there's a need?" And I go, for once in my life, I'm gonna be selfish. It doesn't need to, I don't need to have that added onto my plate as a griever, being recently having lost my son, to have to tell myself that I need to do something for you. No. If you're really that concerned, you need to make the effort. And a lot of the things I tell people are pretty simple. Just make the effort. You don't necessarily have to say anything. I tell people all the time, if your friend or the person you're talking to just wants you to sit there with them in the dark and be quiet, then that's all they want. It's not, you don't have to make a grand gesture, is what I try to tell people. You can say our son or daughter's name. Don't think because you say their name that all of a sudden I will have forgotten that my son's gone. In
Mhm.
fact, a lot of us we would love for you to say their name or ask us about our, loved one when they were around and try to relive happy memories. Um, so those are kind of the small things that we're all kind of looking for.
Yeah, that's such good advice. That's really beautiful. Um, for someone who has recently experienced loss, what advice would you offer them as they begin to navigate the journey?
I typically tell people in analogies because that's how I learn. I tell people, when you first experience loss, I mean, the hard part about loss is it's such an abrupt end to life. That's probably the biggest reason why we have so much problem with it, because you go from one day things being okay, the next day they're gone. Um, so that's the hard part about it. But what I tell people is I go, imagine you're on a train, you're riding through like the Rocky Mountains, and all of a sudden, right before you see this long dark tunnel. That long dark tunnel is representative of when you first enter into grief. It's long, it's dark, you're discombobulated, you don't know where you are, you're confused, you're not moving anywhere, you just want to sit in one spot because you can't figure out things. Life is just haphazard at that point. But at a certain point, while you're riding in that dark tunnel, all of a sudden your eyes become accustomed to the dark, and you can't see everything, but you can see enough to kind of move. So you start slowly inching, no matter how small, you start slowly inching forward to where you think the front of the train is. And you keep doing that over time. And then all of a sudden, however long it takes you to get out of that first tunnel, you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel coming from the front of the train, and you start to get some light in the car that you're in. And you look back and you realize, well, wow, I was way back there and now I'm up here. I have moved forward some. So that's kind of like I've grown some in this, I've healed some in this, but I still have a long way to go. And then, all of a sudden the train comes out of the tunnel and you have a positive moment, if only for a short while. But what you notice on the track is you can see for miles in the distance, and you notice there are several tunnels in front of you. Now, that first tunnel to the next tunnel, the amount of light that you get is a very short amount of time because it comes frequently. But the farther you get down along the tracks, the tunnels become farther and farther apart, meaning the times that you have rough moments or sad moments start spacing themselves out more. And you can see all the way down into the valley where, yeah, you still have the tunnels, but they're pretty significant distances apart. And you notice that for as far as you can see, yeah, you still have tunnels, but they're significant distances apart. And that's where kind of the lifelong part of grief comes. And yeah, you'll have a lot of time where you feel okay and things are quote unquote back to normal for a while, but you're still probably going to have moments here and there. And that's how I kind of describe grief to people that are new to it.
It's a great metaphor. Really good. If Zachary could read one of your letters, what do you hope he would take away from them?
He, I try to relate to him that I was never perfect. I made a lot of mistakes. And even when he was around, I always used to tell him, if daddy feels like he makes a mistake, I will apologize. I never want him to feel that because I was the adult that it was, my way or the highway kind of scenario, at least when it comes to things relating to him. So I would hope that he realized that I did the best that I could with the ability that I had, and the fact that for most of it I had to kind of work on the fly. I had to think on my feet while things were going on. And you know, even though he was nonverbal, that he knew that he was loved more than life itself. Um, did I have moments during some of the frustrating times of I don't know what's going on? We're always in and out of the hospital. Did I have those moments? Yeah. Um, and yeah, he did see him. And I would, when I would have those moments, I'd come back and go, buddy, Dad's just frustrated. I want to figure out the best care for you. And I can't figure it out right now. And I go, do you understand that? And in his own way, he'd clap his hands as if to say, yeah, I kind of get it. Um, but yeah, I honestly, I just hope he understood that despite with everything going on, that both he and that myself and his mother did the best that we could with just what we had in front of us.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners about your journey and your mission or the message of Letters to Zachary?
Sure, two short things. First of all, for men, because originally this all started for just men, but it has expanded since then. For men, I would want to tell you, men are a weird gender in the sense of men are the only gender that does not want to be told when to do it, how to do it, where to do it, how much to do it, and all that stuff relating to it. But the irony of that is one of the hardest things that for men to deal with, which is emotion, especially relating to the loss of a loved one. You don't want to be told what to do, but as it relates to this, you let everybody and their brother tell you what to do. So you can't come to me and go, well, I don't let anybody tell me what to do. Well, do you let them tell you what to do on how you feel in a situation that that they have no idea about? Well, yeah, then no, you don't. You let people tell you what to do. What does it matter whether it's someone you know or someone on the internet, what they think about the situation that you're personally dealing with? You know, my thought process has evolved over time in the sense of I'm going to write what I'm going to write. If you like it, great, wonderful, thank you, I appreciate it. But if you don't, click somewhere else because I'm not going to stop writing the way that I feel in this situation. It's my feelings. If you can relate to it, wonderful. But I'm not going to lose any sleep over it because you think I'm grieving the wrong way. is what I try to tell a lot of men, because men are funny in the sense of when they see someone else do it and they're okay doing it, then they'll want to do it. But none of them want to be the first one. And so if that means I have to be a guinea pig to the men in this and where I'm at to show them it's okay and it's not detrimental, then call me the guinea pig. I mean, I have no problem being that. The last thing I'll say is the quote that I came up that I personally came up with that I say to everybody is when I'm talking to them about grief and the grief journey, I'll go, though I strive for the mountaintop, it is the valley in which I live. And what I mean by that is we all want to be on the top of the mountain, seeing the grand views, having the great time, and everything's positive. But the reality is we don't live life on the top of the mountain. Those are moments of life, but ultimately we will eventually end up back in the valley. And the valley, it can be good times, but it's typically the times where we have the learning experiences, the difficult times, and all of what people might consider negative. But it's those learning experiences that teach us and give us the fortitude to want to start climbing that mountain again. And that's where you really learn something. That's the practice, the experience to get us back up to those positive times. We have to live there at certain points of our life to be able to achieve what we want to achieve. And that comes with dealing with emotions, dealing with grief, anything related to that.
Yeah, so true. Well, before we wrap up, I do this little thing called Soul Spark 5, which is
Okay.
five quick questions that are a little bit rapid fire, just shorter answers, just to wrap up.
Uh-huh.
Um, what's one thing you've learned on your healing journey that you think everyone should know?
The old quote, and it may even be cliched, is this too shall pass.
Mm.
Maybe not the grief journey, but the moment you're in, this too shall pass.
When life gets hard, what's one practice or tool that helps you come back to yourself?
I will always have to go back to writing and just as an outlet. That for me to be able to get it out and get it onto a page, whether I share it or not, means it's not sitting on me and I can move on to other things.
What does the word healing mean to you right now in this season of your life?
It means not moving past the grief, but moving forward with it.
If you could go back and whisper one message to your younger self, what would you say?
Oh wow, that's a loaded question for me. Um, in my fashion, I'd probably go back and say to myself, "Buckle up, Buttercup, because you're going to have some bumpy moments, but you will learn things from them."
Mm. Last question. What's lighting you up or giving you hope these days?
The ability, whether I see it helping them or not, but the ability of being able to help others through just what I've created. Sure, I have my fans or followers that always comment, but I also have probably 1,200 others that probably don't comment. And whether they say it or not, I'm sure it's helping them in some form or fashion.
Totally agree. So many people read and feel and are affected and never say a thing.
Mhm.
So true. Jason, where can people find you?
Um, you can probably the easiest place is my website, which is letterstozachary.com. On there on the front page, if you go to the bottom, you'll find all my social media, which I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. If you really want to go to LinkedIn, all of them under Letters to Zachary, except for LinkedIn, it's Jason Tuttle on there. Um, if you're interested in the coloring book, If you go to letterstozachary.com, I believe it's the third section down. You'll see a picture of it, and I've got a button right there that you can go to the Amazon page if you're interested in it. Um, as for posting, typically I'll post on Facebook first, just because that was the first one I ever started with. Um, if you're someone that would like to read some of my journal entries on my website, I have every writing from the first full year of my grief journey on there. It's like 78 different pieces that's on there that you can scroll through it if you're interested in reading them.
That's very powerful. What an offering.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, thank you so much for talking with us today and sharing your story. I'm sure it will help a lot of people, and I can already think of so many people that I want to send your way to your page that I'm sure will
Okay.
be really um, glad to have a place and a resource to
Mm-hmm.
find community. So thank you for what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I certainly appreciate being on your podcast today.
Well, I'll reach out and let you know when we have this one up live. And
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, many blessings on your journey.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this tender and powerful episode today. I'm deeply grateful to Jason for his courage, vulnerability, and for the beautiful legacy he's continuing to build in honor of his son, Zachary. If you'd like to learn more about Jason's work, read his letters, or order the grief coloring book, visit letterstozachary.com. You can also follow him on social media under Letters to Zachary. If this conversation touched you, please consider sharing it with someone who may need it. And if you haven't already, one of the best ways to support our podcast is by leaving a rating and a review. It only takes a minute, but it makes a huge difference in helping others discover stories like these that can offer comfort, connection, and hope to those walking through their own healing journey. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for walking this path with me. Until next time, may you be gentle with your heart, and may we all be kind to one another. Peace.